To the BIMA Health Show with me, Ayesha Abbas, on Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM, online at ramadanradio.org and streaming on Facebook. So my name's Ayesha and I'm a third-year medical student with the University of Bristol. And this is the BIMA Health Show that will be live every Thursday, Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 p.m. And we will have different medical professionals and people from within the medical field coming in to discuss lots of different aspects of health that's relevant to the Muslim population. Now, Ramadan is, of course, a very precious time that we're able to show appreciation for all that we have, improve our empathy and compassion for the less fortunate, and finally reflect on ourselves and our consciousness of Allah. However, it can be difficult to maintain a good health during this month, as we're so focused on everything else during this blessed time, whether that be family, spirituality, or even continuing with work or study in our day-to-day. So I want to discuss a few pointers that may help us to maintain a healthy Ramadan. Specifically, when's the best time to exercise, which I've based off a few scientific research articles, a bit of dietary advice using some sources from BIMA, and finally a few notes about looking after our mental health and well-being, which we'll do as a Q&A with Dr. Zirva. And before I let her introduce herself, I just quickly want to state in that I'm a medical student and this does not substitute medical advice. Feel free to message in any questions, but viewers should not message any questions regarding your personal health problems. And if you do have any questions regarding your personal health, then the best thing is for you to see your registered doctor. Finally, I want to add in that maintaining a healthy Ramadan is actually something that we're all indirectly encouraged to do. The Quran states to eat of the good and wholesome things that we have provided for your sustenance, but indulge in no excess therein. This concept is something that can and should be applied in the context of Ramadan. I say this, I'm known to really love food by anybody and everyone who knows me, and I'm not always the best, but every year we improve. And even if you don't do everything perfectly, even if you take on one of these pointers, mashallah, that's still progress. So I'll let Dr. Zirva introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Ayesha. I'm Dr. Zirva Khan. I'm a GP in the West Midlands. So I'm probably one of the people that's not actually in the London area doing this remotely. So alhamdulillah, thank you very much, Ramadan Radio, for giving us the opportunity to use this platform to educate our population. Alhamdulillah, I really hope, inshallah, it is a useful experience. A few other things about myself. I work for the Royal College of GPs. I also work in the local area trying to promote health awareness for our South Asian communities. And recently, alhamdulillah, have taken up this post with the British Islamic Medical Association. And we are really, really excited, inshallah, to see this through. And I'm quite excited about today because Ayesha, the floor is yours, but I get to question you as if you're like a medical student on placement with me. So I'll be testing your knowledge, but inshallah, I'm sure you'll have lots of useful things to tell our listeners. So is there anything else that you want to add, or are you happy to get cracking?
We can get cracking, I think.
Ready, steady. All right. So there's lots of questions related to staying healthy in Ramadan. Like you said before, it's something most people struggle with because it's not always necessarily their priority. Although we know people's health can deteriorate if they don't look after it properly during Ramadan. So one really common question, and it's related to exercise and fasting. So when is the best time in the day to exercise when you are fasting?
So the research I have based the following conclusion on comes from a paper called Strategies for Maintaining Fitness and Performance During Ramadan, which looks at athletes' performance levels when exercising at different points, specifically before sunrise, after sunrise, and after sunset, which was at that point in time around 9 p.m., which isn't too different from when we're sort of breaking our fast now. And then it compared these performance levels to a control, so their pre-fasting group. Now, these are the three optimal times according to the study. So before sunrise, just after sunrise, and after sunset. And although there's benefits and disadvantages to each, and it's important to note that every case is still different and it's about what you personally want to achieve with your exercise, but the study suggested that the best time of these in order to maintain an optimal fitness and performance during Ramadan is actually after sunset, as performance on the test done after Iftar at 9 p.m. was no different to the control, so the pre-Ramadan results. So from a performance standpoint, the data seemed to favor a sort of late afternoon or post-Iftar training. And there's three sort of reasons or components to this. So One is that during training, they are able to hydrate themselves. Two is the fact that after training, they can begin the refueling and rehydration process without delay. So the refueling and rehydration process is an essential part in order to maintain optimal fitness. So if you delay this, it's this delay which can cause a reduction. So if you were to exercise just after sunrise or just before sunrise, you're not giving yourself enough time to have this refueling rehydration process without a delay. Finally, it's because evening training is still close to the ideal period of the player's 24-hour clock for performance and psychomotor skills. So simply, it was still close to their optimal time of functioning. However, the major disadvantage to this is that it does affect your sleep. So that's why I want to go back to my first point about there being advantages and disadvantages to each of them. But solely from a performance standpoint, this is the best option after sunset, after you break your fast. Even if you aren't an athlete though, either try to go for a walk in the day or try to do a home workout. I think it's important for everybody just to aim to maintain a certain level of physical fitness and performance, but also remember it is natural for it to be slightly reduced towards the end of Ramadan. So I think that sort of summarizes the key points that I wanted to make about when the best time is from a performance standpoint to exercise during Ramadan.
And would you have any general tips? Would you have any general tips about exercise? Because I know you mentioned from a performance point of view, maybe towards the evening is better, but you have the sleep problem that might come with that. But generally, what advice would you give to anyone who's listening, who might want to know when, what they should do regards to exercise? Because some people get quite they just stop exercising during Ramadan, which isn't always the right thing to do. So what would you suggest for that?
I suggest that honestly, just allocate yourself, and even if it's just an hour a day, but an hour a day, allocate that time for you to just do even something small, whether it be a walk, and you can even make it interactive. It's always sort of more nice sometimes to do things when you're with other people. So even if you sort of allocate a time of the day where you do a home workout with someone else, whether it be via Zoom or with people in your household, or you just, so I'd say those are sort of main points. Just give yourself, allocate that time where it's your time to exercise. I think when you allocate that time to do it, you're more likely to do it. If it's something that you just say you'll do, but you don't specifically allocate that time, it's a lot more difficult to do it. The same way you allocate time to cook food in the morning, the same way you allocate time to go to work, to get dressed, allocate that specific time to do the exercise and try to make it interactive. So that way sort of you can encourage someone and they're encouraging you. So you're together, sort of in it together.
Thank you for that. We've had a message through. I am a cyclist and I train an hour before sunset. It allows me to hydrate at Iftari. Is this a good compromise? I think it is. I think it's really good that you're keeping up with cycling and training before sunset. It's interesting because there is plenty of evidence also to suggest when you exercise, the adrenaline kick, especially when you're feeling very tired, very lazy towards the end of the day, it actually gives you that boost of energy. And hydrating afterwards, like you mentioned before, Ayesha, that is just supplementing your body and kind of re-nourishing it and repairing it as well. So I think that's really good. And I hope other people can also keep up with at least some of the exercise that they do normally. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So Ayesha, what key dietary points would you give when fasting?
So I acknowledge that people fast in different ways. Some people stay awake the whole time, some people sleep and then wake up, and then some people just don't wake up at all. However you might do it, the healthiest way to start your fast is by starting with a healthy sahur and ensuring that you have at least 2 healthy meals a day. I'll go over what I mean by healthy next, but I'm going to do it in order. So from sahur, contents of your meal, and then iftar. Now, a key point to make as well is hydration is key. It's so important that you keep hydrated in the hours of the day where you're able to do so, because the majority of the day you'll be deprived of this and you will feel the effects of what you have consumed during those few hours of the day. And dehydration is probably one of the biggest things that sort of affects everyone during Ramadan. I acknowledge that some people may not feel too hungry at this time, but it's still important to get your calories in so you metabolically and chemically have the energy that you need for the day. So first point, just to summarize that, is 2 healthy meals in the day. Wake up for the sahur, or just make sure that you incorporate those 2 meals at some point in your sort of in the day. Now, in terms of the contents of the meals, your meals, and this applies both for sahri and iftar, meals should be simple and not differ too much from a normal diet. And it's important that your meals contain items from all of the major food groups. So this is sort of advice that I'm sure many of you would have heard before, but it's sometimes good just to sort of consolidate and reiterate that. So fruit and vegetables, this is both for sahri and iftar. Try and incorporate fruit and veg, some whole grains, so chickpeas. It can either be plain or with potatoes and yogurt, your sort of bread, your other cereals, that sort of thing. Protein, so your meat, your fish, and alternatives. So I personally have a lot of vegetarians in my family, and they all really tastily are able to substitute the meat with corn and other sort of healthy meat alternatives. So if you are a vegetarian, there's other alternatives, but still try and get the protein in. Dairy, so your milk and your dairy foods. And finally, your foods containing your fats and sugar. Now, I know during Ramadan, we all like to indulge in our guilty pleasures. We like to indulge in the sort of our fried foods, that sort of thing. Now, the best thing to do is to try and think of an alternative substitute to that, that's still not really healthy, but healthier, and you're still getting in your fat and sugars that you need. So by that, I mean, rather than having your fried samosas, have baked samosas. In terms of your sweets, try and avoid your sort of high sugar sweets like your gulab jamun, your baklava, that kind of thing, and substitute it with milk-based sweets and puddings. So your milk-based sweets and puddings are actually a lot better. So by that, I mean things like rasmalai or barfi. So those are the sort of ways that you can still get in those little guilty pleasures, but have a sort of healthier alternative to what you may sort of previously be used to. And finally, again, hydration is key. So water, 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 keep yourself hydrated. Now, things to avoid, like I said previously, your deep fried foods, your pakoras, that sort of thing, try to avoid those. Your high sugar sweets, so things like your gulab jamun, try to avoid those. And finally, your high fat foods. So rather than having your parathas and your really oily, greasy curries and pastries, try and substitute those maybe for a chapati made without oil, and your sort of your grilled foods, your grilled meat, your grilled chicken. Final thing now is iftar. So again, like I said, that sort of does also apply for iftar, but breaking a meal with a feast is what can cause your weight gain. So what happens is when you haven't eaten all day, and then all of a sudden you load your body with lots and lots and lots of food, you end up with an insulin spike. So insulin is basically just a hormone that signals to your cells to absorb the sugar, absorb the sort of glucose that you get from your food and absorb it into your cells. And then the cells then use that for energy, or they can store it as fat. Now, if you haven't eaten all day and then you load your body in with lots and lots and lots of food, you end up with an insulin spike, so a significantly raised insulin all of a sudden. And that causes your body to store more of the sugars as fat rather than use it as energy. So that's why the main thing is to try and eat a simple iftar. Don't overeat, don't overload yourself with food just after you've sort of not been eating all day. So I'd say those are the sort of main key points that I would get for dietary advice.
Thanks, Ayesha. That was a very detailed answer, and I think there's quite a lot to take away from it. You mentioned a few times hydration is key, but it's interesting, when I've done my clinics, not many people understand exactly how much water they should be drinking. And when you do ask them specifically how much water they are drinking, they'll say, oh, I have several cups of tea and coffee and a few glasses of juice, but really maybe only 1 or 2 glasses of water. Our body needs more water than it needs anything else. It doesn't need coffee and it doesn't need tea. This is sort of a societal thing that, it's everybody does it, so that's why we do it and it's nice. But actually, we're not hydrating our body by having caffeinated drinks. And I'm sure lots of people at the moment are probably having caffeine withdrawal headaches as well, because that's what we know happens in people who have been regular drinkers of caffeine. So the recommended amount of water that you should be drinking, unless you have any health problems to suggest otherwise, would be between 8 to 10 glasses of water. So it's even more important when you are fasting, that around the hours that you can eat and drink, that you do try as much as you can to get that in. And if you can't get it in through water drinking, then whether it means you have lots of watery fruit. We all love fruit salad when we are breaking our fast. It's really refreshing. Some people put fruit in their sahur food, so in their oats or in their cereals. So that's really important to consider. We've had another question through, which is OMAD, which is a abbreviation for 1 meal a day, is considered to be better for autophagy by some doctors than 2MAD, so 2 meals a day. Any thoughts on that? So I suppose from a medical perspective, I don't think there's enough evidence to say what is better. The thought process is that it's safer to have at least 2 meals in a day. But I think overall, beyond that, it's really about what you're having in that meal. So, your meals should be nutritious rather than, like you said, high fat, high carbohydrates. You should be fueling your body rather than necessarily having food that's not good for your body. So I think we're halfway, Ayesha.
Perfect. Happy to move on to the next question then.
Yeah, if anybody has just joined in, we are Radio Ramadan London 87.9 FM. We can be found on Facebook or YouTube streaming live as well. Okay, so next question, which is the final question really, but I think it's got a lot of interesting discussion that's worth having. So Ramadan can be stressful mentally for some people. I mean, we have been through coronavirus and there's been a lot more stress than there has been previously. I think people who would have never suffered from mental health problems have started to suffer from it. And some people don't realize that it is actually mental health problems. And we have a problem in our population anyway with kind of accepting mental health problems exist. We won't go into that. But are there any tips that you have for people in ways that they can try and help maintain a good mental health?
Yeah. So to start off with, I think it's important to acknowledge that mental health and mental health conditions, it's all a spectrum thing. People think that, anxiety or whatever other mental conditions there are is just a definitive diagnosis and you have to be a specific way and fulfill a specific criteria and that's that. But it's not as simple as that. It's a spectrum. So you can experience a few, even if you are just feeling that little bit more stressed, that little bit more anxious, or, feeling slight changes within yourself, you will know yourself. And it's important to acknowledge that it is a spectrum. So and it's unfortunate, like you mentioned, like you sort of touched on before, that we still have a sort of taboo in many cultures when it comes to sort of discussing mental health and these sort of things. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it is a real thing to start off with. And there's active ways that you can sort of help yourself and also even help someone else if you sort of see that someone else is struggling, and things that you can suggest. So inshallah, I hope that people do listen and take on at least something from this today. Now, I think one thing is that during Ramadan especially, it can trigger a relapse of sort of mental conditions. So it can trigger anxiety, it can trigger these sort of things. Our bodies are under stress, physically, psychologically, and that's something, the starvation, it can trigger it. And the starting point, I would say, is to talk to someone, not to deal with things by yourself. And I think a lot of the time people feel like they need to deal with it by themselves and they want to be strong in that sense. But I would say strength is dealing with it by discussing it with somebody else, by confronting it head on. That is true strength in my eyes. So one, I would say talk to somebody. It's always easier to deal with it when you're dealing with it with somebody else, so you're not alone. Two, I would say breathing exercises. Now, I know that a lot of people may think that this is sort of fluffy advice or there's not sort of a scientific basis behind it, but that's actually not true. So with certain breathing exercises or breathing in sort of certain patterns, what you can do is you activate your relaxation pathways. So we've got two sort of pathways in our body. We've got our stress pathways and we've got our relaxation pathways. And the relaxation pathways, you have sort of relaxation hormones. So it's called the parasympathetic pathway, but that's all very technical and very jargon, so I won't go into too much about that. But when you activate this pathway, you release these sort of hormones, these sort of chemicals in the body that also help relax the body and can help actually combat the stress or combat the anxiety that you may be encountering. So breathing exercises is a very simple but a very effective tool that you can use to your advantage. Furthermore, I would say you can, things like apps, there's other apps and books and things like that. There's other sort of resources that you can use to your advantage as well. An app that I've sort of heard of is Headspace. I know that it's got very specific breathing exercise, very specific routines that you can use, whether it be that you're unable to sleep, or whether it just be general stress. It's got very specific sort of exercises that you can do to help you sort of overcome whatever it is that you may be battling at that point in time. So I'd say branch out, do a bit of research, but download some apps to actively help you in the moments where you're feeling whatever you may be feeling. Finally, and this is again quite a simple one that we can use to our advantage, is a good sleep routine. So people often think, yeah, of course, sleep is important, but I don't think people know how important a good sleep routine is. Good sleep is good mental health, because without it, your body is not able to function at its optimum. Mentally, chemically, everything is going to be a little bit more imbalanced. So that's why it's so important, even during Ramadan, where our sleep is already that little bit more disrupted, to try and have a solid routine. So trying to sleep at sort of a consistent time. I won't say same time, because of course I know that you may be doing your night prayers, or Iftar is going a little bit later every day as well, but try to have that consistent sleep at the same time and waking up at a sort of similar time as well, and trying to get in the solid 8 hours of sleep. If you're unable to do that because of work or other commitments, and I know it can be a struggle, but trying to just incorporate those hours in and having that good solid routine is something, like I said, that's very simple but extremely effective in sort of helping your mental health and sort of maintaining a good mental health. But ultimately, if these things aren't helping, it's so important that you seek medical advice from a registered medical doctor. These are all sort of resources and tools that you can use to help yourself. But ultimately, if you feel like you need more, it's so important to have the strength to actively go and get that help and speak to a registered doctor, because ultimately they will be able to help you with your specific situation, and inshallah refer you to wherever you may need to be referred. Finally, I would say try to stay connected to the spirit of the month. This is a beautiful time. It's a time for reflection. It's a time for peace and a time for gratitude. You can use prayer to your advantage, and alongside other things, alongside the sort of things I've already said, things like Quran, nasheeds, try to get as engaged in this month as you can. And all of these things, inshallah, will help everybody to maintain a good sort of mental health.
Thank you very much, Ayesha. I think you quite nicely covered over lots of points. And I am seeing in my work that more and more people, they are wanting to access kind of help for mental health problems. And I think awareness of that is helping as well. But I still think we have a long way to go. But inshallah, Ramadan is a very positive month for everybody. And if we engage in it fully, immerse ourselves in it, spiritually, physically, try and look after ourselves, look after those around us, inshallah, that will really help. But yeah, I'm impressed with your answers. So I have to give it to you. It means you've been doing all the right studies and all the work that you should be doing as a medical student. So yeah, I'll hand it back over to you now then. I think we've got a few minutes left really before we close up.
I think I just want to maybe finish off then by adding in a little Islamic reminder for everybody. So in chapter 7, verse 31, the Quran actually states, "Eat and drink freely, but waste not by excess, for he does not like the wasters." So I think that's a nice little reminder for everybody to try not to overcook. And if you do, don't throw it away, save it for another day. And just, yeah, I'd say that's a nice little reminder for everyone. And just try and really actively engage in this month and make the most of it. It's a time for reflection. It's a time for family. It's a time for gratitude. And, it's a very positive month. So try and engage in every way that you can. And inshallah, I hope everybody has an amazing Ramadan. Dr. Zirva, do you want to add anything else?
All I wanted to do was just plug in the next shows that we've got. So like you mentioned before, Ayesha, we have this health show, this BIMA health show will be running every Thursday, Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 till 7 for the first 2 weeks. And then for the last 2 weeks, it will be from 7 till 7:30, inshallah. But on Saturday's show, it will be again, both of us, but the roles will be reversed. So you'll be asking me all the questions, and then you'll be able to ask me whatever you like. Feel free for anyone to join us on Facebook and YouTube and ask some questions, because that will also be really useful for us to get to. So on Saturday, it's kind of how to manage your health conditions, because, you know, we acknowledge many people in our population have some form of a health problem, whether it's diabetes or something else. So we'll be loosely touching on that. And then on Sunday evening, inshallah, we have a provisional plan with Mufti Usman Moravia and NHS London, who will be coming to talk about coronavirus. I'm sure we're all fed up of hearing of coronavirus now. It's still in the news, it's still everywhere we go. But alhamdulillah, despite the cases improving, as well as the amount of deaths being significantly less, I think there are some updates that we should all talk about. If anyone has any questions that day, please do send them in as well. But that was all really. Thank you very much, Ayesha.
Perfect. And thank you very much, Dr. Zirva. And I look forward to questioning you on Saturday, taking the hot seat.
I look forward to it.
So, Jazakallah khair, and thank you everyone for listening to me, Ayesha Abbas, and Dr. Zirva Khan on Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.